Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows in the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supernatural, as well as the latest episode of Legacies. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I code the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Supernatural, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Legacies. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Supernatural. A crazy episode. So let's kind of break everything down. There's the whole Jack and Dean situation. It's like, oh, let's be hunting buddies. And he's like, first of all, let's never refer to it as the end. I also love that beginning where you have like Jack being like, oh yeah, Sam and Charlie are all together on a mission, on a hunt. Which you hard cut. It's like, oh man, they must be doing some amazing stuff. Hard cut to them just sitting in the truck, just watching. But I will focus more on their stuff later on. But I also love, like, Dean being like, Sam is so smart, so leave it up to him. And just hard cut to him spinning a fidget spinner and being so entertained. And Charlie looking at him like he's an idiot. He just looks, he's like, oh, and kind of gets all embarrassed about it. I was like, ooh, that's so good. Also, I feel like that doesn't happen a lot. It was kind of like the cold open to this episode, like the whole little musical cues. I mean, it's kind of interesting because that dude Winston, it's kind of like, I don't actually know the title of that song. It's Staying Alive, right? I'm guessing. I mean, everyone knows the song. I just don't know. The actual title of the song. Actually, I don't even know who it's by, even though I'll throw it these years. But nevertheless, it's just kind of ironic because it's like, while that song is playing, before it even really gets into like the hook or chorus of the song, dude ends up getting killed. So poor bastard. But it's so interesting because you have this girl named Harper, and there's a whole thing about her having bad luck. Also, at the same time, you have Jack asking questions about courting. It's like, oh yeah, that comes before the sex, right? And then Dean's kind of like, later on, it's like, okay, I will answer all your questions about how the birds and the beads work. And he's like, wait, what's that mean? I don't know what you're talking about in that regard. So it's so good. So it's like, oh, Harper has bad luck. It's like, oh man, like what's going on? Like I was assuming it's like, oh, she cursed or something. I did kind of think it was a little funny that she kind of fell for Jack immediately because she's like, do you believe in love in first sight? I don't know why I said that word, sight. And then the whole situation with like, oh yeah, that poor bastard Miles got killed and he was very protective of her and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, what's going on here? It's like, is it a monster following her that's obsessed with her? It's really sad because like they bonded a little bit too over the fact of the matter is it's like, oh yeah, stuff in the past is kind of not always good and it's kind of hard to kind of be happy afterwards. It's kind of to keep it up, to kind of move past all that. They kind of bonded over that because they both have stuff in their past that kind of, she talks about her past and obviously she hasn't had the best luck with men, which is kind of like the running thing in town for people. It's like, oh yeah, Winston's just kind of like the latest example of that. So there's that. And then lo and behold, what is the monster? It's a zombie. In particular, it's her ex-boyfriend, Vance. I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. How did this happen anyway? I'm like, oh, wow. I was like, that's so interesting. It's kind of like this turned into like a supernatural teen romance situation, which I also appreciate Dean being like, oh, yeah, come on, this way, Archie. And I'm like, just this stupid nerd in me just go off, just like, hey, same network and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure you would have made that reference even if Riverdale wasn't a show, but it makes you wonder, it makes you kind of go, you probably make those references even more just because you are on the same network and everything. So you go, wait, nudge. That's how I interpret that, because I didn't even think about it until he pointed out. It's like, right, the jersey, the red hair, well, reddish hair, it's like, of course. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. I also love when Jack was kind of going undercover, he referred to Dean as old man. Dean's like, oh man. He's like, oh man, my ass. Like, I love that cut him so deep. He's like, oh man. And he's like, we'll talk about this later. He kind of gave Jack a look before he left. I thought that was pretty neat. But I didn't know how this was all going to turn out. And then I love the twist of being like, oh yeah, Harper starts making out with her zombie boyfriend. At first I'm like, okay, so maybe it's in your eyes. You're like, no, it's okay. He's my boyfriend. Like, the fact of the matter is, love knows no bound. The fact of the matter is, I loved him back then. I can love him now. Even after the fact is he's most likely killed a lot of people. It's like, oh no, she's the one that did it to him. In fact, we end up finding out that she's actually the one that killed him. And it's like, that actually makes sense because Vance wanted to leave town, but she didn't want to leave. She's just like, oh, we can see the world through books here and stuff like that. And it's like, so you killed your boyfriend because he kind of wanted to essentially leave you. And it's like, that sucks. And then she resurrected him because it turns out she's a necromancer. Comes from a long line of them and found out, like, figured out Jack and Dean are because I was thinking like, oh, him being a zombie and stuff like that. I was like, does this have something to do with Michael? It's like, no, it's just Harper, and Harper being kind of crazy. And she's like, I'm so sorry about this, Jack, but the fact of the matter is, I love him. And it's just like, yeah, I had to kill him and bring him back to life, but we're so happy to get him. It's like, you are nuts, lady. It's because it seems like she was a little ditzy when it's like, oh, all about love and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, because it also turns out the whole killing people, that's not something Vance did on his own. This is some little twisted game in there. It's just like, ooh, we turn it into a little fun game of like, oh yeah, he stalks the people that are kind of into me. And it's like Miles, for example. Miles had to die just because, like, I mean, it was Miles. Yeah. You know, it's like, you are a terrible, terrible person. And I even love that Jack, you know, the plan is to make Jack kind of manipulate her into it and be like, hey, fact of the matter is, we could be together. She's like, I'm literally just trying to have you killed. He's like, yeah, every relationship kind of has its struggles, its tough spots, and she's almost like falling into it. I thought the plan was going to be like her be so smitten with Jack, you know, advance and like return her to being dead. I thought that was going to be the plan. Not really. But then Dean tried to point it out to him. It's like, yeah, you're literally having to eat human flesh to stay alive, and she kind of resurrected you from the dead. This isn't really love. It's like, you know, there's that whole situation. And then Sally Harper gets away at the end. And the fact of the matter is, she's obsessed with Jack now because she's like, oh, I can't wait to find you. I mean, granted, I'm going to have to kill you for what you did to Vance, but I can bring you back and we could be together again. She's like, you literally got me so inspired to leave my town, which is the whole reason why she killed Vance in the first place, because he wanted to leave and she did. And it's like, oh, I mean, to be fair, Jack kind of forced you into that situation because, like, other than bringing people back to life as a necromancer, she doesn't really have much else under her belt. But that was so crazy to me. She's sending this letter off to him for him to receive. I'm like, that's so good. So in the long run, everything worked out in the end. They put Vance back in his grave. Granted, Harper is still out there, and she's going to be looking for Jack. So, and the thing is, she's going to send him this letter. She also knows roughly where he lives. Like, she is also a very small town. So it's like Jack sadly gave her his real address and everything like that. So that's definitely going to be a very interesting situation. I cannot wait for that to come back up again. But it was kind of nice because, you know, Jack and Dean kind of bonded in this episode over the regard of, like, both of them had big regrets. Dean has regrets about the whole Michael situation. No matter how many other people, including Sam, tell him it's not his fault, he doesn't really believe it. He blames himself the most. Jack, on the other hand, does the same thing because it's like, I had the power to kill Michael, but I was so distracted with my dad, just all that family drama. And because of that, I don't have my grace anymore, and now I can't stop Michael. Like, I had the chance, and any depths and any stuff that he calls isn't just on Dean. If anything, he's probably like, it's not on you at all. It's on me for not killing Michael in the first place. You know, he probably also blames himself for being suckered in by his dad's, like, propositions and stuff like that. So there's that element to it as well. You know, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, growing as a hunter is like, you know, kind of, you're going to make mistakes, but it's kind of learning from those mistakes to never make them again. And it's like learning when not to blame yourself, so. But then sadly at the end we see Jack kind of bleeding from his nose as he's coughing more, and then he passes out. So I've talked about this before, kind of random theories. I don't remember if I said this one exactly, because obviously this all deals with his nature as a Nephilim. I think originally I put it as maybe it was because whereas a normal angel is typically inhabiting the body of a human, so if their grace is stolen or whatever, it doesn't have the adverse effect, because it's like, yeah, that's who they are, but maybe because they're in a borrowed human body, it doesn't completely take all they are. I think that was a theory I kind of threw out there first, but, you know, and this other thing I'm about to say might have been something I said too, so I might be reiterating something I said before, but I don't remember. But now I'm sitting here, it's like, if I said this before, oh well, like I said, I'll just kind of elaborate on it. The fact is that because of his nature as a Nephilim, it's half of who he is, and so maybe it's killing the human side of him, because inside he's off balance. Like, his nature as a Nephilim, as half human, half angel, it's off balance, and his body doesn't know what to do with it. Like, whatever side of him that is angel, now that his grace is gone, it's killing his human side, because at the very least, in a lot of occasions, not always, but because in those, I guess when an angel possesses your body, it's different, because, like, you know, in most cases, when an angel possesses your body, it's a living body, so it's like, it never has those adverse effects. Well, wasn't Cassio's grace stolen after Jimmy was dead? I'm pretty sure that happened. I'm sure, has there been instances of angel? Well, Joe's had hers taken, but it's small amounts, you know? There probably has been an instance that I'm not thinking of. If you can give me an example, please do in the comments down below, but I'm trying to remember. Because I'm pretty sure the whole Castiel thing happened after the Leviathan thing, of him, like, losing his grace and stuff. Like, 'cause that was in season, was that, like, 8 or 9 when he ended up losing his grace? Like, it got stolen from him? Because wasn't it, Metatron that stole his grace in the first place, if I remember correctly? Yeah, so that had to be, like, season 8 or 9. Like I said, either way. So I'm very interested to see how they handle that situation, what that means going forward. Because there's no like proper way to handle it. I mean, I guess he could steal another angel's grace, but to be fair, there's not a lot of angels around. I mean, there's not even another archangel, because a regular angel's grace probably wouldn't be enough to fill him up. Because even it took Lucifer a while to kind of power up, even when he was taking small doses of Joe's grace, even grace he picked up from other angels. There's that. Plus, there's not a lot of angels anyway. Plus, we don't know where Michael is, so there ain't no just snatching his grace, because snatching an archangel's grace would probably like help boost that a lot. So, I'm curious to see if there's any like reversing what's happened to him, because like there's a whole thing of like, yeah, it might even take a century for Jack's grace to come back. It does make you wonder too. That's something I didn't even think about. How would his whole aging situation work? Because he is half human, so he'll probably not age like an angel would. Which, how do angels operate when it comes into human bodies? Like wouldn't a normal body, I guess because their essence in it keeps the human body strong and heals with their abilities. So I don't know, I feel like I don't remember that ever coming up about an angel being in a human body for a long period of time. I'm sure there were probably examples of it, and I'm just blanking on it. Either way, so there's that. The other side of the episode, I was hoping it would turn out like this, and it kind of does. I was like, I hope we literally cut back and forth to Sam and Charlie being in that truck the entire episode, not really doing anything, which happens most of it, which I just love it. It's just a conversation. It's kind of interesting because it's like, okay, comparisons between Otherworld Charlie and this world Charlie. It turns out Otherworld Charlie fell in love. She lived with the love of her life, which is sad because this world's Charlie never had that. She never found Kara. But the sad thing is, Charlie of the other world lost Kara. It's kind of interesting because it's like, oh yeah, when Lucifer and Michael originally fought, like an EMP of sorts went off over North America and wiped out a whole lot of the electronics. It's kind of interesting to think that there was like a approach like that, which I guess to be fair, maybe we'll kind of see some similar things happening over here in this world. But nevertheless, it turned into some interesting conversations between them because it's like, because essentially in her mind it's kind of like that world is kind of apocalypse rules, where it's a situation of when the going gets tough, a lot of people, the worst side of people comes out, like that more monstrous side of them. Like, you know, it's like, oh, without power, without food, without water, the more monstrous side of people come out when they're kind of pushed, when they feel like they have no other choices. So that, it seems like that's more so why Kara ended up dying, because a lot of people would turn on each other. Like I said, an apocalypse situation, which it was in their particular world. Now, in her perspective, she's kind of like, that's kind of the expected. All societies are like that, which Sam is like, our world isn't like that, which Charlie responds, give it time, which is an interesting thing. The difference between that world and this world is that world never bounced back from an apocalypse. This world did. Like every time there was an apocalypse level thing happening, Sam and Dean stopped it before it really got started. And so it turns into a situation of, because there's never been a full-blown apocalypse in this world, we haven't seen people in this world kind of have to react like that. But when the time comes, they probably would. Which, to be fair, Michael's here so he could be planning all this. Obviously, he's modifying all these supernatural monsters out there, so that pushes that element of like, we could be seeing that happen in this world. So it could be that line from Charlie could be very foreshadowing. I mean, because this is how normal people live their lives, not knowing that the supernatural are out there. It also begs the question, like, if the world became more aware of that, like, wouldn't people become very scared of each other? Like, that's something that I feel like doesn't come up too much, but that is something kind of have to think about, you know? Because once you know about the supernatural existing, it's like there's no going back from that. It will always haunt you. Which is also kind of an interesting thing that comes up in another conversation where Charlie was kind of like, yeah, I'm calling it quits after this mission. And it's like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, like it's just like this life defying the supernatural. She's like, I want to leave it all behind. I want to leave people behind. Mainly from a combination of many different things. Obviously, she lost someone that was important to her. She survived the apocalypse, and it's kind of like I was only going to stick around till you got everything operational. And it's like, hey, you got things operational. You've got other people to rely on. You don't need me. Because for Charlie, it's like, it's already been too much. And I guess keep going forward. It's just going to, it's that life of a hunter. You'll lose more and more. Like, no one goes out of the way who wants to be a hunter, which, Sam can understand that a lot. I mean, him and Charlie from this world, because neither one of them wanted this life. They kind of walked away from it. In particular, Sam's case. He's walked away from it before, but that's the thing he was trying to get across to this Charlie. Is like, you can't walk away from this, or like the supernatural is going to find you. Like, even if you try to walk away, there's no walking away from that. Because not just him, let's not forget, him and Dean have walked away from this life multiple times and still gotten dragged back into it. Not because they wanted to either, So it still managed to find itself. Like, Sam went away, and what happened when he came back, his fiance got killed by Yellow Eyes. So it's kind of like, yeah. For example, there was a whole thing in season 8 when Dean was in purgatory. Sam tried to live a normal life. Normal life. That didn't work out. Dean tried to at the end of season 5, part ways into season 6 while Sam was going trapped in hell with Lucifer and Michael. There's that whole thing. Which does beg the question, too. Like, we know Lucifer's cage had Lucifer. We have Michael from the other world, but what about Michael from this world? That was always a thing that was never really talked about, like, whatever really happened to him. It's just kind of like Lucifer kind of left him a mess. So, then it's something that even crossed my mind now. It's like, Michael from this world still exists. So he could be the key to this. Like, maybe Jack could take his... Like, I don't know. Because the whole thing was kind of like, oh yeah, last time Lucifer talked about him, I think, was in season 11. When it's like, oh yeah, we got to go up against God's sister. Lucifer's aunt. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, Michael, I left him a shriveled mess or something like that. Like, so it begs the question, like, what happened with all that? Whether that'll circle back or not, it might just be something they just kind of like I said, because they've never really circled back to it. They've constantly circled back to Lucifer, but not Michael from this world. So it's kind of like we're not going to worry about that. Or this might be the perfect time to worry about it. Just be like, kind of circle back to all that. In the end, we'll kind of have to wait and see. That's me kind of going off on a whole tangent. So, but also getting back to it, like, just because Charlie's lost so much, she kind of wants to stay away from people, because it's like, why get so close to people? I think her mind was probably like, you're just going to lose them again. But when it was all said and done, they were able to stop the Muska, which is essentially part man, part fly. It is literally a man fly, which is interesting. And the whole situation behind it is basically a bad egg, one who doesn't mate, ends off going and killing people and basically implanting its eggs into those people. That's how it continues if it doesn't find a mate, which is kind of sad, because it's like, oh yeah, because you were a loner and never found a significant other, you kill people to continue your species, essentially, which is, I guess, I'm sure there's probably like some animals, I'm sure there's some things in nature that do that exact same thing, so I'm sure that kind of applies in some regards. I mean, to be fair, that's how flies work too, because like maggots flies come from maggots, and maggots can be found in like foods and bodies and stuff like that. So it kind of, I don't know, I guess it kind of circles around in itself in that regard of like playing into that whole aspect of being part fly. So luckily they were able to stop the Muska. They were able to save the one guy, but the whole conversation that Sam had was to basically convince Charlie she can't go. The fact of the matter is, yeah, not everything in the world is great. Not everyone in the world is great, but there's some good. And it's like, when we help people, those people might go off and help someone else. And for him, it's like, that's the most important thing. That's kind of what makes it all worthwhile. And basically also being like, we as humans need that connection, because, that's part of just who we are. We need that connection between other people. So when it's all said and done, Charlie says like, okay, I'll think about sticking around. So it's like, awesome, which is good, because it always broke my heart that Charlie wasn't around anymore. It's interesting too. I was thinking about it, but it never really came up in the episode. In, Sam's mind too, I'm sure it still has always been there. He blames himself for Charlie's death because Charlie got involved with the whole trying to get Abel's Kane's tattoo, Kane's mark, off of Dean, and she kind of got caught up in all of that, and she died as a result of it. And it's like, Dean didn't want that whole situation, but like Sam went behind his back and did it anyway. So I think keeping this Charlie around, maybe it kind of, for one, it's kind of probably the same reason for having Bobby around. I mean, it's just these people are their own people, but I'm sure it doesn't hurt having to see familiar faces, people you've lost along the way like this. I mean, especially it's interesting because it's like they got Bobby back, they got Charlie back, and they have their mom in their life too. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's interesting how it all kind of works out like that, But like I said, it's just a very interesting episode all around. I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this, in particular the Jack stuff. And now moving on to this week's episode of Legacies. Crazy episode. Let's break everything down. First of all, we have Dana and Sasha disappearing. It never even correlated in my head to think, all right, Caleb fed on him, so obviously he'd be suspect number one. Obviously, MG doesn't tell anyone, which eventually that gets out, but that's so interesting. And I love the entire episode. You have Lizzie being like, the fact of the matter is, like, I had to put aside my feelings for Dana. We'll stop all this because that's what heroes do. I, give myself up as tribute, the whole, Hunger Games situation. Also, the beginning where MG had that nightmare. First, he gets attacked by Gorilla Grodd, which I'm like, because he even said, he's like, Grodd. I was like, shut up, you're what? I love that, just because he was reading Flash comics. And then it was like a dream within a dream because he gets attacked by Ghostface, which for such a long time, I guess because I haven't seen those movies in such a long time, I forgot that that's what the killer of the Scream movies is named, Ghostface, which is like, well, in retrospect, it's kind of, it makes sense. But it's like, I don't know, I guess it's because it's so long. I feel like I don't remember them ever referring to him as Ghostface. Is that something that exists outside of the movies, or did the later movies canonically refer to him as Ghostface? I don't remember that ever coming up, but I don't really remember the later movies. I don't even remember the first Scream movie. Nevertheless, so there's that whole ordeal, which I thought was kind of interesting. I wonder, is that implying anything? Maybe, maybe not. But a lot of interesting things went down in this episode. First of all, they go to Mystic Fall High trying to pretend to be normal, and it's like, hey, we haven't seen Mystic Fall High since what? Vampire Diaries? It's been forever. Can't even tell you when in Vampire Diaries. I mean, I guess when the last time, Elena and them... Wait, didn't Caroline hold something for, Miss Mystic Falls? Did that involve high schoolers, or did that involve people outside of high school? Was that like a beauty pageant but for adults? I don't remember. I think that was adults. So it might have been when they graduated, like Caroline, Bonnie and Elena, that was it potentially. I don't know, but yeah, it's kind of interesting just getting a little look at that and stuff like that. It is kind of sad too, because it's like Connor's kind of like, oh man, he's kind of like the loser in this situation. He doesn't really know, he's kind of an outcast amongst the school. But you have Hope being embraced immediately, and she's kind of constantly chipping away at Landon just because she doesn't trust him, and it's just all this other stuff. They're getting information. They're trying to track down and figure out this whole thing. Like I said, it's so interesting. First of all, finding out that this whole thing was about a spider, which is interesting. Side note, I had no idea spider monsters had such a history like that back in Greek mythology, of a beautiful woman who was cursed to look like that and then just disguised himself as human. At what point in time did Connor become one? I guess between him throwing the milkshake on Lizzie and now he became one? I don't know. I mean, it made you wonder, why did it specifically pick Connor? I mean, to be fair, it is the thing of it picks someone around Caleb. I mean, not Caleb, Landon. So it's was that on purpose? Was it just coincidence? Because we still don't know what it was that drew Landon to the dagger, because it's if it was a human, it's well, Dorian and Alaric are there, but why specifically Landon? Not unless there's more to Landon's situation. I mean, It could be like something in his bloodline, his biological family, like their bloodline or something like that. Might be something in there that's could, that I didn't even think about that till now. It's like bloodlines play a big role in this show, so it's like maybe something in his bloodline is connected to that dagger, hence why it was drawn to him and he was drawn to it. Like, whereas we might think Hope might be the one that's like, decides whether it's like save, that dagger will help save all or destroy all. Maybe he's the one instead, or maybe he's kind of like a bloodline of protectors when it comes to the dagger. Who knows? We'll kind of have to wait and see on that regard. But yeah, it turned out to be a giant spider. I felt so bad for Dana because it's like, oh, Dana came out of the woods. I'm like, oh, let me guess, was that something disguising itself as Dana back then? And it's like, oh, she's a vampire. And I'm like, oh, wow. Well, she doesn't have a ring or anything, so why shouldn't she burn it up in the sun? I was like, well, she was in the woods, so maybe it gave her enough shelter. Besides, she's not a full-blown vampire. She's in transition. And then that kind of made me think, does MG and Caleb have rings? Because I didn't really pay that attention. I guess because it's such a thing I don't think about. I'm like, right, vampires need, you're out here rolling around in the sunlight, so you must have daylight rings, which is just kind of interesting. Like, I feel like I just kind of let that slip my mind because it comes up here and there, but it's never always something that's always like pointed out. You just kind of, because you get so used to it, you just kind of let it slip your mind because like everyone just usually has one, and you can just like easily craft those now. So it's kind of, whereas before it was like, oh man, there's only like a sparing few around, but it's like, nah, you toss those around like there's nothing. So that's why I'm kind of like, that was kind of interesting to me. But I felt so bad when Dana starts going, it's like, oh man, she's gonna have to choose whether she's gonna be a vampire now. I was like, that's gonna be interesting. The person that Lizzie hates gonna have that choice. And it's like, oh, don't worry, it's like, yeah, we should wait and give her the choice in like a day, and it hopes like she'll be dead by then. And Lizzie's like, oops, I guess I miscalculate, which is like, shows you what kind of person Lizzie is in that regard, which is interesting. But I was like, oh man, that'd be interesting. You're stuck there with your enemy if she decides to become a vampire, because I could see Dana totally doing it and loving it, but then she started puking. I'm like, oh, that normally doesn't happen. And she kept going until she's literally nothing but skin like that. And I was like, that's brutal, dude. Like, literally threw up everything inside of her into goop, and it's like, basically she was liquefied, because apparently that's what spiders do in this, which is so interesting. Because that's the interesting thing too, and that kind of comes up in conversation. That spider was there even though the knife wasn't there. But that's why I'm kind of wondering, is the knife not as important as it was before? Remember when it lit up? Whatever was important about the knife, whatever was sealed inside of it, maybe it's inside of Landon now, because the spider caught such an interest in him. So maybe that's the case, or maybe it's like what I said before, that he is connected to the knife in some shape or form, that like, something in his lineage is connected to it, hence why like things are kind of drawn to him and the knife, because getting to him is getting to the knife. Maybe, potentially, I don't know. The latter of the whole aspect of like, oh yeah, whatever was in it went in him, might be the case. Who knows? This whole circumstance did also bring up an interesting thing, because it's like, oh man, like obviously before the whole spider thing got found out, it's like, oh, vampires did this, and it was like, right, because Matt's like, it was obviously a vampire who did this. You got to get things under. I'm like, right. Like, Matt's borderline anti-supernatural, but more so than anything, he's borderline anti-vampire. I'm like, right. Can't let that slip my mind, because the whole, like, school for supernaturals, the whole Salvatore school, has got to still bug him a little bit. Werewolves, witches, sure, but it's more so vampires, because out of any of the supernaturals, constantly comes up. It's always a big thing in this world. Vampires are the most destructive. They're the ones that tend to kill people. They kind of lead the bloody mess. And Matt's had to cover up so much. Let's not forget all the stuff he covered up in the Vampire Diaries when he was okay with it. Even like Caroline's mom having to like cover up a lot of stuff like that. But then it's just eventually Matt got to the point where he's like, I'm done covering it all up when it's all said and done. Like, hence why I said kind of went borderline anti-vampire, which you understand that. It seems like he lets a lot of stuff go, but at the same time, it's just like, it seems like he's right on the edge to kind of take things to the next level if he has to, So it's kind of interesting in that regard. Which that leads to an interesting conversation later on between Alaric and Matt. Matt's like, if your students cause problems, I'm going to come after them. And Alaric's like, and if you threaten my students again, I'll come after you. Because Matt's suggesting is like, because you're so tied to this supernatural thing, because your daughters are witches, and the fact of the matter is, like, because at one point in time he was, you know, he was a hunter in all of this situation, and it's like you lost perspective because you surrounded yourself with these supernaturals. It's like you're forgetting that they are what they are. It's like, no, he made it pretty clear to Landon from the beginning that this school is not meant for even regular humans, because you're literally surrounded by like predators on all sides when it comes to all three supernatural groups. And so Alaric hasn't lost perspective, but he's trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. He recognizes each of their natures, especially the vampires. But yeah, that whole Caleb thing, it's like, wow. I was wondering, it's like, are you about to drug him and let Matt take him off? It's like, no, you just lock him up for what he's doing because he broke the rules. That in itself kind of led to some interesting things, because obviously MG ratted Caleb out. I love how Caleb was so nonchalant about things. It's like, damn, what that girl eat when Dana was throwing up, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm a bounce. So yeah, y'all do that. Landon's most likely the monster. Y'all deal with that. I'm bouncing. Deuces, and just leaves. I'm just kind of like, okay. It's so interesting, and he brings up an interesting thing that, because he's in his mind, it's like MG. It's like you're choosing other people over us. Like it's kind of interesting that we are seeing it still apply even under these circumstances. We saw it being a big plot point in the originals, the tribalism between the three different groups. It even comes up because especially when it comes to like Raphael's story, but I'll kind of get to that. But like the whole like, oh yeah, wolves usually eat outside, just because it's like, I mean, to be fair, it makes sense with wolves because wolves are pack. You know, it's the whole aspect of a pact and everything. But there's a very like big tribalism amongst the three supernaturals. Like they kind of keep to themselves. And so for him, it's like, you're like, for Caleb, it's like you're letting, Alaric and Lizzie twist your mind up about things. The fact of the matter is, look at this. They couldn't even just let us, a bunch of vampires, go out. What did they do? They kept witches over with us to keep us in line. Which, to be fair, it's like you are off breaking the rules and stuff like that. Because for him, it's like, because I guess for him, he feels like we're kind of held to a different standard than everyone else. Because MG's like, but we got these blood bags. He's like, that's how probably Caleb knows that that's not human blood, because he's been drinking human blood. It's like, you notice there ain't no other animals around here and stuff like that. I'm like, right. Because the last thing they want is you to have a taste for human blood, because the moment you get a taste for it, nothing else is going to quite quench that thirst. So, which is crazy, but that, like I said, that also plays into that nature of like, everyone looks at vampires as the most. I mean, when you look at the course of this series, it's like the biggest issues all across the board have always been vampires. Look at Hope's family when it comes to vampires. Literally the most destructive vampires of them all, the Michelsons, the originals. And it's like her dad being at the top. I mean, to be fair, her dad's a hybrid, but still more so his vampire side. It's not just him. The other siblings wreaked a little havoc in their day as well, too. But it's that situation of like, vampires have to be watched and monitored. Like, it seems like it's biased, but it's just like, just their nature is kind of something that needs to kind of be tamed, which is a whole conversation all on its own. MG, I think, had never really had that perspective before, but I'm interested to see, like, what does that mean going forward now that, you know, Caleb's kind of put that all in his mind, plus Caleb getting locked up like that. I mean, yeah, he broke the rules and everything, but it's like, would you do that to anyone else? To be fair, they locked Landon up and stuff like that, but at the same time, it's like, oh, Landon stole the dagger, yet he's, like, around the kick and he's fine, so it's kind of like, oh, okay. You know, so I think MG might start having a different perspective, especially because he is kind of blinded by the fact is, it's like, oh, he likes Lizzie, and he kind of doesn't hide that. It's like, oh yeah, the compulsion didn't work. I was initially being like, well, the compulsion doesn't work because they're all on Vervain, isn't it? Because doesn't Matt make it a point to make it so that people aren't being able to be compelled? But it's like, no, he was just distracted by Lizzie, and he's just like, oh man, you smell so good. And it's like, geez, I didn't know you were going to be so blatant about it. Borderline thirsty about it, but still, it's just kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting that. Which is kind of cute in a regard, but I'm curious to see what that means kind of going forward. You know, it's interesting because, I mean, some that we know of, Lizzie hasn't really made any moves towards Raphael, which is interesting considering where things are between Josie and Raphael. They really kind of bonded this episode, which I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, their whole story being like, you know, Raphael would rather spend time with Josie. Also, I think I let it slip my mind, the whole Gemini situation. I'm like, right, your siphoners like Kai, right. Because, like, yeah, they don't have any magic until she touched the wall. It's like, right, that's why I love this show, too, because it's like supernatural stuff. Like, this show is kind of like giving you the supernatural 101 breakdown that if if for whatever reason you don't remember 100% how everything operates, you're getting Landon's perspective. I think this is also meant for people who might not have ever seen the Vampire Diaries or, you know, the originals, maybe kind of, you know, for a younger generation who didn't never really watch those shows all the way through, or, you know, it helps me as someone who hasn't seen earlier stuff. Like, the originals is kind of like, okay, you already know about this world, so we're not going to really go over explaining a lot of stuff. The Vampire, you know, like, there's certain rules when it comes to the whole supernatural world that I feel like they don't, like, constantly bring up all the time. They bring it on every once in a while, but I think this show is doing a great job of being like, oh yeah, if you forgot how the supernatural world worked, well, we have Landon here where we can explain everything to him, while we're also explaining to those who are following all these shows and you're here watching Legacies, and probably for newcomers potentially, which is one of those things where I'm always like, it's weird that you watch a show that you've never... I guess it makes sense. I can't be that type. Just for me, I can't watch a show that I've not invested other time into other shows. It's just how I am. It's how I feel. But the fact is, of her siphoning magic and like her being caught in a web, and the only way to kind of siphon magic was to kiss Raphael. So that hasn't come up, but I'm curious to see what that means going forward for Josie and Lizzie's relationship when that kind of comes up. If, you know, Lizzie starts potentially paying attention to Raphael like that. What I also thought was kind of interesting was because the fact is, I guess because of his situation with his girlfriend, after having lost her and now like kind of dealing with this whole werewolf side of him, he wanted to keep her at a distance, but Josie is like, I'm not scared of you, you know, it's kind of like, I'm here. Because I thought it was kind of neat too. He's like, was that kind of some magic spell you used to calm me down? She's like, no, I'm so used to doing it with Lizzie, I guess I'm just kind of a natural at it. I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting thing. But yeah. Which that pack mentality was kind of an interesting thing. Those guys beating the crap out of him like that. I guess it's kind of like a hazing thing, but more so like it's to force you into joining a pack because no one at the school is good alone. Because even Josie's like, yeah, like I don't really handle myself alone either because I always have Lizzie no matter what. I mean, to be fair, we don't even know what they're like when it comes to the other witches. Like, cause I mean, they've got to kind of be outcast too, just because of their whole. I mean, that was Kai's whole situation because he was kind of considered an abomination. It's like, oh, as a witch, you don't really have any magical power. It's just you siphon it from other people, and it's like, okay, so it makes sense, you know. I mean, we haven't seen it, but I'd assume that Lizzie and Josie would kind of suffer from that too, at least to some extent, but maybe not. I feel like we haven't really rolled with a whole bunch of other witches. We've seen some here and there. To be fair, I think Penelope's the only one we've ever gotten decent time with, but everyone, like, you've never seen them really mix and match with other witches. I mean, to be fair, we kind of just focus on like the main groups with each one. Like Raphael's kind of our in with the vampires, and I guess Lizzie, Josie are in with the witches, Caleb and MG the vampires, and you know, Landon and Hope kind of being the outsiders, Landon being a human and Hope being the tribrid. So, but that's, you know, kind of getting into it. But, you know, I think, like I said, the dude was kind of a douchebag at the beginning, but I guess that's the mentality of it. Just because of your nature as a wolf, you kind of have to handle things like that. Because he's like all arrogant and stuff like, oh, I'm the alpha. You either bend or you break a type of situation. And he was kind of like, oh, you get on one knee and submit. And he was like, nah, I'm just messing with you at the end. So it's kind of like, I don't know. Like I said, I guess there's tactics and reasons for that, but it was kind of interesting because for Josie, it's like, this school is worth it. Like, everyone here has their own issues, you know, some curse, you know, that's by blood or whatever, but everyone's dealing with something, and the fact of the matter is, we are here. Like, it may not be perfect, but we are here for each other and always have each other's back, so. I'm curious to see Raphael being with a pack, will that have any impact on his relationship with Landon? And speaking of Landon, there's the whole situation with Hope. I thought that was kind of a pretty neat moment at the end where he was kind of like, yeah, the fact of the matter is, all you've done, like, I wanted, you know, I know things are hard between us, but the fact of the matter is, you turned on me. Like, everyone assumed I was a monster, and you just went along with it. You didn't even try to say, like, oh, maybe it wasn't me at first. It's like, the fact is, you might have done that later on, but the fact of the matter is, at first, you didn't say anything, because you harbor such resentment towards me, you couldn't just, even for a second, entertain the idea that maybe I wasn't the bad guy in this situation. To be fair, maybe that's because for Hope, she's been lied to and manipulated, not just in the case of Landon, but just in her life in general. She's been lied to so many times that she's got an even thicker wall up, you know? Because, I mean, to be fair, when you look at her dad, Klaus had the biggest, like, case of, like, paranoia and trust issues, so it's kind of like, subsequently that's come down to Hope, because not just because of Klaus, but many other factors have kind of contributed to that. Just a lot of stuff in her life. But when it came down to it, the whole conversation of like, she was kind of like, it'll take a while for us to trust you, but he's like, I got it. He said that over and over again. The fact of the matter is, I was hoping that spending time together would have made things easy, but it's like, no, all you did was degrade me. You didn't trust me when the time came. And he's like, you wanted a normal life so badly? Well, congratulations, Hope. You're normal. Because for him, it's like, I thought you were better, but like the fact is, the way Hope was treating him, it's like, that's what all the asshole kids at my school treated me, in particular Connor. So it's like, yeah, you're no different from them. I hope you're happy. Thanks. There you are. You're normal. Because it's like being something else in his eyes is probably it's better than normal, because you don't get caught up in such normal human BS, you know? So you could see it kind of affect Hope in a way, because she feels bad about it. It's just because she does like him, because she trusted him and he broke her trust. And once you break her trust, once again, kind of playing to that Klaus angle, it's hard to get that back, because you'll always have these, paranoid about that. So, because like I said, for the first time, she let her guard down with Landon and it blew up in her face, which once again, he brought it up. I don't know what happened with this. You guys don't really know much either, but the whole point is we're supposed to be in this together, and you just threw me under the bus like that. You left me to hang. Which all that kind of goes into a Lawrence I thought was kind of interesting, because like Lizzie's like, I wasn't trying to be the hero, I was just trying to do what you could do like Hope, and that's because that's the only way to get your attention. He's like, I don't want you to be like Hope. Hope is the cautionary tale of what not to be. She is not the goal. And I was like, that's interesting, because also that's the title of the episode. I think a lot more of the series has probably done that. Definitely this show so far has it, but I'm sure if you go back, probably the Vampire Diaries probably have it. I don't think the originals has that, but maybe it does. Maybe the same thing for the Vampire Diaries too. I don't know. But, Lizzie and Josie are pointing out to their dad, it's like, the fact of the matter is we have to protect ourselves. Like, this isn't something you can just protect us from, because you aren't letting us learn offensive magic, because you didn't tell us the truth, like we were all in danger in particular situations. And the only reason why Josie knows any offensive magic is because she taught herself. So Alaric's going to have to take a different approach when it comes to the school going forward. So that's going to be an interesting thing. But I also thought was kind of an interesting thing was like when MG was compelling Sasha about what happened to Dana, you had Lizzie being like, just make her forget about it so she doesn't feel any pain. But then like you have Hope being like, no, don't take that away from her. Because if you take that, because taking someone's pain away too is almost like taking away their humanity too, at least a chunk of them. Because I think even with being compelled, if you take that pain away, it's going to destroy that person in some shape or form. Like there's always going to be something inside of them that's a little wrong, that's a little broken because of that. But it's like, let her feel that. Yeah, it's going to be hard to get through every day, but the fact of the matter is when it's all said and done, you can reflect on the good times at the very least and let those good times carry you through this whole bad situation. And you see a look on Lizzie's face because she realizes, obviously Hope is speaking from experience. Because the difference between Hope and like everyone else's situations, it's like, yeah, that's something that they're all dealing with. But the fact is, Hope's wounds are pretty fresh. She blames herself like so much. It's like what happened to her mom, what happened to her dad, like just all that is still fresh wounds for her. So she's trying her best. Like she's still in the process of grieving and trying to figure things out. Because once again, we don't know 100% the time frame, but it's still relatively soon after Klaus and Elijah's death at the end of the originals. It was also an interesting thing, too, of her being like, yeah, she never had a normal school life. And it's like, right, because the beginning years of your life, you were on the run after season 3, trying to get Hope away from all of that while, also letting his family be, when Klaus sacrificed himself to Marcel like that. Then there was a whole, not having a normal childhood like that. And then there was also the fact of the matter is, season 4 on, well, at the end of season 4 on, she was in the, Salvatore school. So it's kind of like she never had a normal life at any point in time. To be fair, with your family being the Michelsons, being the tribe that you are, it's like there's no hope for a normal life. All you can do is, I guess, make the best of what you have. So, and then also at the end, we see Dorian get attacked by something else. And it's like, dude, it's kind of interesting because, like, like I said, the previous seasons never had like a monster of the week type of situation. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, we're dealing with this overarching arc of like, yeah, there were main antagonists, but it's like they were one specific enemy. Yeah, there were other plot lines tied to them, but like it's crazy and it feels weird that this show has like a monster of the week type of feel to it. Not in a bad way. I mean, it's all connected to the overarching arc, but it's like, where the hell have all these other supernatural things been this entire time? It's kind of like the big question. Like, were they laying dormant? Like, what's going on? Like, how literally no one in all their years, including the originals themselves, ever came across these things. It's kind of I'm very interested to see how they go about explaining that in itself. So, from what I was reading, it seems like the next episode won't be until the 29th. So there won't be one next week, but the week after next. I don't know if that applies for Supernatural too. It might, but nevertheless, just keep that in mind. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.